Good evening. I hereby call this meeting of the Brockton Finance Committee to order. It is Monday, October 30th, and a quorum is present. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Representative Mendez.
Good evening, councilors. It's an honor to be here today as a state representative. And I'd like to invite Inez Figueroa to come forward. So on October 26th, the Black and Latino Caucus held the Latino Excellence Awards at the State House. And then as a member of the Black and Latino Caucus, I nominated Inez Figueroa for this very special and phenomenal award. And as we were given this special opportunity to nominate someone in a community that is always there, that is making a difference in a community, I already knew who the person that I wanted to nominate was. But as someone who's always out and about in the Latino and Hispanic community, I decided to ask people around, if we were to nominate someone in a Latino and Hispanic community, who do you think that we in the city of Brockton should nominate and recognize for this special award? And 100% the people said Inez Figueroa, absolutely 100% Inez. So I knew that it was the right person to get this award. And this special award, we presented at the State House, the governor presented, the Black and Latino Caucus presented, and this award tonight that Inez, you're receiving is not just from the Massachusetts Black and Latino Caucus, is not just from the Brockton State Delegation, it's not just from the governor's office, but it's from the entire community. The community nominated you. They said that you're the person that really believes in them, is passionate, working hard for the people, the Latino and Hispanic community in the city of Brockton. And I'm so proud to nominate and give this award tonight to Inez Figueroa. But let me tell you a little bit about Inez. So Inez Figueroa proves every day that age is only a number. Thriving in her 70s, Inez is the founder of Latin Women's Association, Asociación de Mujeres Latinas, in the YMCA building in Brockton, and serving Brockton and surrounding communities. Prior to her starting her nonprofit organization, she worked as a domestic violence and sexual assault counselor for 25 years, but retirement from counseling was a way to keep her important work going in a new way. She decided to start the Latin Women's Association after seeing that there hadn't been a Latin center in Brockton since 1997. Inez didn't reach this point in her life easily. She came to America at the age of 11 years old. Raised in poverty, she dreamed of growing up to help people in her adult years. She became the mother of 4 daughters and struggled to escape abusive relationships. She courageously moved with her 4 daughters to Massachusetts, earned her GED, and then obtained her degree through Massasoit Community College and Boston University, thus beginning a career in human service. After 25 years of service, she received many awards, such as 1999 Woman of the Year from Brockton's Mayor's Office and Merit for Outstanding Service for Puerto Rican Discovery Day. Inez takes pride in community service through volunteering and supporting local politicians to help reach the Latino communities. She also has been an instrumental part in helping victims in the hurricane relief from Puerto Rico and the community when arriving here. Currently, Inez is providing free domestic violence and sexual assault counseling, as well as running weekly groups and individual counseling. She is also continuing to support the Latino community by supplying domestic items, gift cards for food, and other necessities. So, Inez, thank you.
Well, I want to say, first of all, thank you, God, because they keep me here doing the work that I like to do. Also, Rita, thank you very much for this award. I was not expecting this. I've been working in the Latino community for many years. I love what I'm doing. I love helping people. I'm doing a parade, a Hispanic parade. It was wonderful, beautiful, for second year now. I'm helping people with undocumented family who don't have no food in the house, who cannot work. My daughter and I, we're all looking for something donation because my association is no fund, no money at all. I had the association because people donate to me. And every time they donate something, I put it in the account and I take out some gift card for food. And whoever would like to have food because they don't have no food, I give it to them. It's not for me. So I'm doing this free, free. But I love it. I love what I'm doing. I love to help everybody. And this is my thing. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. And if anybody needs my help, I'll be able to do it. Thank you. Rita, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilors, this evening, Councilor Rodriguez and Minicello are unable to join us. Mr. Clerk.
Item number 1, we have the acceptance of the minutes of the October 16th, 2023 Finance Committee meeting.
Accepted and placed on file.
Item 2, we have the appointment of Dr. Larry Green of Brockton, Mass. to the Council on Aging as a member for a 3-year term ending October 2026. Invited Dr. Larry Green.
Is Dr. Green with us this evening?
Madam, he did call late last week and he had the flu.
Okay.
And was not sure he'd be able to attend tonight.
All right, I'd entertain a motion to postpone.
Motion to postpone till the next finance meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. All in favor? It is postponed.
Item 3, we have the appointment of Ann McCormick of Brockton, Mass. to the Council on Aging as an alternate member for a 3-year term ending October 2026. Invited Ann McCormick.
Good evening, Mrs. McCormick.
Evening. I don't have much to say. It's just I've been around a long time, and I think my experiences will help me with my position at the Council on Aging.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city council.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All in favor?
Thank you.
We're happy to have you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We have the appointment of Gerald Kolsch of Brockton, Mass. to the Council on Aging as an alternate member for a 3-year term ending October 2026. Invited Gerald D. Kolsch.
Good evening.
Good
Mr.
evening.
Walsh. Good evening.
Resident of the city of Brockton for 57 years. Both my children are graduates of the Brockton school system. We just love being here and want to continue.
Motion to recommend favorably to the full
Second.
city council.
Motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. It carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you.
Item 5, we have the appointment of Janet Trask of Brockton, Mass. to the Commission on Human Rights, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for a 3-year term ending October 2026. Invited Janet Trask.
Good evening, Mrs. Trask.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about this position, and I was appointed by Mayor Units to the first Diversity Commission in Brockton, and I've been working with them since then. And now this committee, I think, is similar but different. So I want to be sure I say it right because it's a little longer. But it is the Commission on Human Rights, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And very proud of our beautifully diverse Brockton, where I live in the house I grew up in, and my husband and I are still there, and we've raised our 3 kids there. And As a member of this commission, I see my responsibility as making sure that opportunities are given to all people of Brockton in the same way. And my most important endeavor is making sure that there's an equal playing field for all children in Brockton, as my children had. And I hope you'll consider me for this. Thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably back to the full city
Second.
council.
Motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you, Mrs. Trask. We're fortunate to have you.
Item 6, we have the reappointment of David Andrews of Brockton, Mass. to the Council on Aging as a member for a 3-year term ending October 2026. Invited David Andrews.
Is Mr. Andrews here?
Motion to postpone till the next finance meeting.
Second.
On the motion?
On the motion?
On the motion, would Councilor Azak consider a favorable recommendation since it is a reappointment?
Oh, I withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Before,
Councilor Lally?
thank you. Counselor, before another motion is made, what if we postponed this to the end of the meeting to give Mr. Andrews a chance to show up?
Yeah.
And then after that, I think we were in the practice in the last couple of years of postponing because we wanted them in front of the body before we made the appointment or reappointment, but let's give them to the end of the meeting.
How do the council
I'll second
feel?
the motion to postpone.
Okay.
So moved.
Till the end of the meeting.
So motion's been made and properly seconded to postpone to the end of tonight's meeting. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. It carries.
Item 7, ordered the City Council hereby rescinds the tax increment exemption agreement tie between the city and CMK Development Partners approved March 13th, 2023 for the property at 137 Main Street. Invited Mayor Robert Sullivan, John O'Donnell, Chairman of the Board of Assessors, Rob May, Director of Planning and Economic Development, and Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the council. Mr. May and Mr. O'Donnell are both here with me. I'll just give you a brief introduction, then you can certainly ask them any questions. I provided for you at your desks a copy of a letter from Attorney Scott Rubin notifying the city that the original development agreement for that site has been terminated. The owner of the property does have another developer that's interested. They've made some preliminary presentations to the mayor and to the gentleman behind me. They can certainly give you details on those. But that new development does not require a tax incentive agreement. As you know, the agreement goes with the property, not with the developer. So since the new developer is coming in that won't require a tie, unless we rescind it, that tax benefit will still be attached to the property. So we recommend you rescind this agreement so that the new developer can come in and start their development. John and Rob can answer any further questions.
Recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend this favorably. All in favor? Opposed? It carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Item number 8, ordered that the following named sum be and the same is hereby appropriated as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. An appropriation of $288,205.86 from police fiscal year 23 full-time salaries to police fiscal year 24 personal services overtime retroactive payment for purposes of funding the Brockton Police Patrolmen's Association contract. This appropriation provides funding for 1 year, July 1st, 2022 through June 30, 2023 of a 3-year contract. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, Mr. Clarkson.
Good evening again, Madam President. So I did send you some notes on this and my typical update. Because of some of the vacancies that existed in the police department, we were able to encumber $1 million from the FY23 budget and fund most of the first year of this contract. But I've been discussing with the clerk for some time, even in that scenario where we have the funds on hand, we still want to preserve this council's legislative authority and your ability to weigh in on the contract itself. And so this transfer is our vehicle with which to do that. So we are now in the midst of that contract. I can report to you it is within the parameters set by the mayor. It's fiscally responsible and sustainable. And the fact that we had the cash on hand to fund the first year of the contract without coming to you and asking to appropriate it from somewhere else, I think demonstrates not only the fiscally conservative approach, but the collaborative relationship we had and have with the police union. And although he's not an invited guest, there is someone here at the meeting that, should you have questions on that, certainly I'm sure he'd be happy to chat about it. So this is a good news item. We're able to use cash on hand to fund a contract. We were able to negotiate a contract that's good for the city and good for the police union, and this is our opportunity to talk about it.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
The motion?
On the motion, I think this is a Scrivener's error, Mr. Claxon, but in front of me I have that the same is hereby appropriated, and I believe based on what is written here, it should say the same is transferred from police full-time salaries to police FY24 personal services?
That's correct, yes.
Is that correct?
Thank you, yep.
I assume well, we have a motion pending.
Should I withdraw my motion? I withdraw my motion.
Just a motion to strike the word appropriated and insert the word transferred.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and properly seconded to amend the order to delete appropriated in the first line and substitute transferred. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you, it carries.
Thank you.
Now?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend this favorably. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you, it carries. Mr. Clerk.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make a motion to take agenda item number 13, take it out of order to be heard first. Due to the nature of the resolve and the brevity of the presentation, I think it'd be proper to hear this matter first.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded to take item 13 next. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Item 13, resolved, be it resolved that Mary Waldron of the Downtown Brockton Business Association and Amanda Glennon, Chairwoman of the Brockton Holiday Celebration and Parade, or their designees, be invited to come before the Finance Committee to discuss the Brockton Holiday Celebration and Parade to be held on Saturday, November 25, 2023. Invited, Mary Waldron or designee, Amanda Glennon or designee.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Claus. This is awesome having all those Santa hats on today. Thank you very much, Counselor, and all the counselors for inviting us today to talk about a very important date. November 25th is going to be the 27th annual downtown and actually Brockton Holiday Parade. With me, I'm asking all the others, please, all the others. We have with us, I'll just name them quickly, and I will promise you to be very quick here. Amanda will be speaking in just 2 seconds. We have Cindy Pendergrass from NeighborWorks, Felicita Supervella from the Cape Verdean Association, Anthony Fowler from BEMA, Maureen Donnarumma from the Brockton Public Schools, but my walking partner on the weekends, Captain Picaro and Ann Beauregard, and a whole bunch of people. I just want to really takes a village. It really does. We're all volunteers, and making every single one of the pennies, the $10,000 that the City Council appropriates for the holiday parade, it's in conjunction with not only with the councilors, but with Mayor Sullivan. Just want to really say thank you. We have, it will go through all the accounts. We have our bills. We we submit them for reimbursement along the way. But I also note that the mayor's office is going to be holding events here at City Hall, and they're in the middle of planning and working with us, along with the Brockton Public Library, that will be having their over 400 teddy bears that were made last year, and really continuing. I am not going to read. There's a beautiful pamphlet that Amanda put together. My narrative is in there. We've really been trying hard to work with all of our community organizations to really pull this off, and I'm going to leave this to Amanda to step in.
Sure. Thanks, everybody, for your support, as always. And, of course, I know many of you were there with us last year, and you saw what a great success this was for the city of Brockton. Over 4,000 attendees came into the city last year, and we're happy to report that it was well enjoyed, but also a safe day for families to come out and come into the downtown and kind of see what's going on, and that's what we're trying to do. The best part about this day is not only is it a celebration and a chance for us to celebrate the diversity of Brockton, this year's theme will be holidays around the world. So in the spirit of being inclusive, we want to learn more about holidays in other places and invite people to teach us more and learn to celebrate as a community, not just Christmas, but all the other holidays that are going on. We strive very hard with the support of you all and with the support of the City of Brockton to make this a free day for families where cost would never mitigate people being able to attend. We have some exciting activities going on this year again. You'll be able to see more about them in the booklet. I don't want to go on too long either, but I just want to say thank you all for your support, and we hope that we'll see you there, and please remain involved. If you look at the first page of the pamphlet, there's just some quick bullet points about how you can help. Sign up to participate in the parade. Sign up to be a volunteer if you can. Spread the word in your community and to your constituents. Share the holiday marketing on social media, emails, flyers. If you need printables, I'm happy to provide them to you. And just be present the day of the celebration. It really makes a difference to the families in the city of Brockton and to your constituents. Thank you.
Amanda, your contact information is in the green folder?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you. Anyone, questions?
Just, Madam Chair, I just want to just to say thank you to Amanda, to Mary, and to all the volunteers. I know how much work you guys put into this. You know, the planning efforts on this parade start back in July or June, July. So a lot of work goes into putting on this parade. And as you said last year, what an amazing time. And this is another great opportunity for Brockton to show the type of community we are, and I'm always excited to attend the parade, and I look forward to this one. So thank you again, ladies.
Thank you. And if I could, we are working with the Brockton Fire Department. They're celebrating their anniversary of the ladder company, and they'll be having an open house. So again, if there's ideas that anybody has, we have a little bit of window of time. So if there's anything else that you'd like to see, we'd like to incorporate that. We will as soon as we can. So I'm available for any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Make a motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motions have made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you, it carries. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Very much for having us. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Item 9, resolve. Whereas the updated property valuations for real property in the city have been certified and also published on the city's website. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Assessors and representatives from the vendor paid by the city to review and establish updated property values for fiscal year 2024 be invited to a meeting of the Finance Committee of the City Council in November to fully discuss the methodology and data elements applied to this annual process. Invited, John O'Donnell, Chairman of the Board of Assessors, and vendors.
Good evening, councilors.
Good evening.
I'm here tonight with Carl Marshall and Bill Corner from Tyler Technology to discuss the annual valuation process. Carl has 25 years of valuation experience, which includes 10 years with the town of Natick. Bill just came to work at Tyler in July, but he has 11 years of experience with the city of Worcester and Leominster. Tyler is the largest valuation company in the country. They have a long history in the city of Brockton. They completed the first valuation in the city in 1984, and they've been here ever since. They currently support 10 communities in the state, plus they maintain the Mass State camera system, which is utilized by approximately 30 communities. Bill's going to begin our presentation. We'll go from there. Answer any questions you may have.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. So my name is Bill Connor,
Carl Marshall is to my left, and he and I are senior project supervisors for Tyler Technologies Appraisal Division, Northeast Region. Our division provides revaluation services to assessing departments nationwide. Carl and I have the bulk of our work experience in Massachusetts. We both have MAA certifications, which means we have passed examinations regarding Massachusetts mass appraisal practices and certification standards, and we maintain our MAA designations through continuing education and, most importantly, maintaining our USPAP certifications, which is appraisal standards. We appraise property using mass appraisal techniques. Those fall into three categories. There's a cost approach, there's a sales comparison approach, and there is an income approach. Through the assistance of CAMA software system, which is called, CAMA stands for Computer Aided Mass Appraisal, we enter the data and it's then analyzed in the CAMA system. According to this analysis, we change tables based on the market conditions to accurately reflect values as of the assessment date, which is January 1st of the previous year. So fiscal year 24 is about to come up. January 1st of 2023 is the assessment date. All the values in the city are assessed as they stood that date. Communities call on our assistance for different reasons depending on their needs. Mostly it's for a 5-year recertification due to Massachusetts recertification standards, and most of the other times we help out with intramural adjustments in between the 5 years. All of our work is submitted to the Department of Revenue to conform to Massachusetts certification standards. The certification standards are available on the Massachusetts website for anybody to read, and it's very informative and shows how mass appraisal works. We work under the supervision of the assessor. Ultimately, it's the Board of Assessors' signature on the submittal to the Department of Revenue. So our analysis of the data is reviewed with the assessor and agreed upon. And all of our adjustments are informed by the market. Nothing happens automatically. We report the market. So I know that's a very brief and broad overview of something that can be very technical, but generally, the things I would like you to take away is that there's only 3 approaches to value that we use: the sales comparison, the income approach, and the cost approach. I'm happy to field any questions about these methodologies that we use. I don't want to have a math lesson, but it's very important for counselors and for you to understand so you can explain to your constituents what it is happening with their values.
Councilor Farwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And gentlemen, thank you. I had a chance to chat with them for a little bit before we came in here. And as you know, what's posted on the website is over 500 pages of I think Mr. O'Donnell said 25,000 parcels of land. I just thought it was important for people to know that there is a very meticulous analysis that goes into the properties that are within the city, the valuation, how they compare them. And I'd like one of the gentlemen to explain something you said to me that I thought was very important. You could get a very high number and you could get a very low number, so you throw out the highest, the lowest, and then you concentrate on the average of the remaining valuations. Did I hear that correctly, or?
Yes. In the residential model, we use sales comparison approach as our primary approach to value. When developing that value, the computer-assisted software takes 7 values. It takes the weighted average value, the MRA estimate, and 5 comparable adjusted sale prices, and arrays them from high to low, drops the 2 high and the 2 low, and averages the middle 3 to produce the value.
Right, and the other thing that you said to me that I think is really important for our residents is this process is followed all across the Commonwealth. All the 351 cities and towns have to come up with the fair market value as of 1/1 2023 for FY '24.
That's
And
correct.
so we don't do anything different than all of the other communities. The information, as I understand it, is sent into the DOR. They have people who review it. Obviously, they don't come out here and look at the different parcels of land, but someone takes a look at it and compares it against what all of the other communities are doing, I would suppose, and the software program. Do I have this?
Yeah.
Okay.
And now they do have GIS systems which are identified with the location ID, which we have to report, so they do have access to some geographical information, GIS system information, so they can get an aerial view of the sales if they so choose, so they can dig in and do their own analysis.
And colleagues, I say this with some degree of humor, but I just wanted people to know that there are trained professional people behind this operation. This isn't a slot machine in the back of Mr. O'Donnell's office where he pulls the lever and it kicks out 25,000 different values. There is a meticulous review of what we do here to make sure that we're being fair and equitable. So I have all my questions answered, and I appreciate, gentlemen, and you, Mr. O'Donnell, for all of the information except the 500-page attachment. That's all. Thank you.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, gentlemen. I know you mentioned the 3 valuations, and I know you said you didn't want to get a math lesson. I don't think we want to get a math lesson, but if you could just kind of briefly explain the valuations and which valuation did you use for Brockton, and why did you choose that method?
Okay, so we use all 3.
Yep.
So it depends on the property type. So residential properties, we use the sales comparison approach almost 100%. And that's just a comparison of properties that sold. Similar style properties are adjusted based on the sale price of the property. So,
now, would that be in that neighborhood or throughout the city?
well, it stratifies many different ways. Do you want to?
The city's broken up into 28 neighborhoods?
Give or take.
Yeah, roughly 28 neighborhoods. So, I mean, like a Campanelli Ranch in Brookfield, it draws it all from Campanelli Ranches in Brookfield. At, Southfield, they draw all from Southfield.
Okay.
Raised ranches that are on the west side, they draw typically. But if you have a unique property, it's going to draw from other neighborhoods. But the neighborhoods are coded. Frank, Kyle could get in this more depth than I can. They're coded different levels. So hopefully draws from that other, a similar neighborhood in a different location.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
So, in addition to the sales comparison approach, part of what we do for residential and commercial is called the cost approach. The cost approach would be, we use a term called RCNLD, so rebuilt as if it's new, less depreciation. So it's very effective in a place where you have a subdivision that was all built at the same time, and all the houses are built the same way, and they all depreciated the same way. The cost approach is very effective in that situation. It doesn't exist in New England very often. So what we do is we blend the cost approach with the sales comparison approach, and that way somebody who's kept up and maintained their colonial and the person next door didn't, the depreciation changes, but the cost of the original building is what is being evaluated and changed over the time. And then the income approach is used for commercial evaluation. So that's basically we're using cap rates to understand the income potential of properties, and we get the data from people submitting their income and expense forms that we send out for them to return, and we use national data, and there's a lot of things that different commercial properties have different types of income and expenses. We analyze all of that and use that approach. Sometimes you find a property that is maybe on the smaller side where the income potential is there, but the cost is more appropriate in the market, where somebody is actually going to pay for the tuxedo shop that's exactly next to the gas station. They're both the same size parcel. Obviously, they have different values. One, the cost approach is probably more appropriate than the income approach. But everything that we do falls into those three different valuation methods.
And then is there, using those methods, right? Yeah, I think as Councilor Farwell said, that potentially one evaluation will give you one number, different, like the sales approach one, the cost approach another, and then you average those two, or how do you? I mean, using those two approaches, how do you find what's reasonable?
So the cost approach is basically combined by the market. So again, if all things were equal, and something on one side of the town is selling for a different price than on the other side of the town, that's where the sales comparison comes into play on the cost approach. The income approach would get blended with the market adjusted just based on the data that we use, cap rates and things like that. They change from business to business, and within business categories, there are different types of income and expenses of somebody operating a small mom and pop law office versus a firm downtown in a big building, So the expenses are relative, but will change based on the amount of income and expenses that they have.
Okay, understood. And just one last question. After you come up with your numbers, is each property kind of then looked at again? Like you said, nothing's done automatically where you're pressing some buttons and you just let it loose. You go through these evaluations, you go through the process, which is you lay out in your addendum. Then are we looking to say, okay, does that make sense? Did we accidentally do something on this property or that property? Like, do we take another look at them individually and say, okay, it was done properly for this address, and just kind of keep moving on?
We do a mass appraisal. We don't look at individual, it's groups. So we'd look at a group of properties, like we'd look at all the Dunkin' Donuts in the city to see what the values are. We'd look at all the raised ranches on the east side, but we don't look at individual properties. There's 25,000 properties, I mean, it's almost done.
Right, no, I know, I'm just, I'm
look
sure.
Look at outliers, when we have outliers.
Right, maybe like the outliers.
We look at outliers.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate it. Yes.
We look at the old to new. We looked at the old to new reports with extreme highs and the extreme lows to see if there's any reasons why they've increased so dramatically or decreased drastically.
So you are looking at the previous year to make a comparison for that purpose. Okay.
And they stick out very obvious to us on a spreadsheet. Those numbers come up red.
Okay.
So if there's a big change in a property, we want to know why.
Okay, understood. I appreciate that. Thank you for the information, gentlemen. That's all. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Chair, sorry.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Motion to recommend favorably, and thank you, gentlemen.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. Very helpful.
Item number 10, resolve. Be it resolved by the Brockton City Council to invite the Chief Financial Officer, Troy Clarkson, to provide information and a detailed review on the city's and school department's fiscal year 23 final expenditures and fiscal year 24 year-to-date expenditures. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, Mr. Clarkson.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the council. I did provide each of you a packet at your desks. I'm happy to provide additional detailed information for what's behind these, but what I would like to do is just run you through quickly what you're looking at, and then I'll have some commentary on how they relate to the work that we continue to do. Some of what I talk about may leak into the next agenda item, because some of the reason why these numbers are the way they are is because of the dynamics in the next agenda item. So this top spreadsheet, and we can make these available on the website, or certainly if anyone is at home watching and would like a copy, they can email my office. what I wanted to do is to give you a snapshot of the funds that are available to the city as of the close of FY23. So these numbers are a compilation of a significant amount of work and reporting that we do, some of the reports I'll get to in a minute, throughout the fiscal year. But I wanted to show you, as we looked to address the school deficit, how we were taking a look at how the city did in fiscal year 23 and what the reasons are behind that and how that relates to the school deficit. So this first sheet simply shows you, in the aggregate, a revenue summary of FY23. So you can see that the tax levy, we collected about 99%. That's actually a very good number for collection of taxes. Our cherry sheet aid was just slightly ahead of what we projected. The reason for that is that we projected the budget before the legislature had finished their work so that their state aid numbers were a little higher. That happens quite often. You never, unless you set your budget after the legislature has done their work, and as you folks know, with all due respect to the legislators here, sometimes the House takes a little longer than other years, and so their process lags behind ours a little bit. And then I think the most important number there is that local receipt number that you see, that the actual numbers were almost $11 million higher than projections. As I say to you every year during budget time when I stand here, when we craft the budget, that is intentional, it's deliberate, and it's critically important. So that $10.8 million is a result of us using very conservative revenue projections when we look at the revenue. And so we overshot those projections by nearly $10 million. On the expense side, and I have both Munis and Excel reports to support these. Again, if you want that level of detail, I'll gladly provide it to you. But since there's a lot of information tonight, I wanted to try to give you an overview. So in the general fund, this is the general fund budget, and there's other numbers here. Obviously, our general fund budget is much larger than that, but these are just in lines where we saved money. There were $15 million in budgeted but unspent funds. $15 million in funds that were approved by this body but unspent for a variety of reasons. But as I look down that end-of-year report, I can tell you that many or most of those were due to the dynamics we'll discuss in the next item, and that is positions that were approved were unfilled, and so the savings accrued largely in police and fire, but not just there, in other departments as well. So the totality of the funds that were appropriated and unspent were just over $15 million. But you do see, I want to note, that there were some encumbrances from that. Included in that, as I mentioned, was the $1 million that we encumbered to set aside to pay the police contract. There was also $1 million that we encumbered in the HR budget. If you remember, in the previous budget, we actually appropriated money in the human resources budget in anticipation of settling those contracts. We've settled most of them, but there is one contract that's still out there, so we encumbered money from HR to hang on to that money so that we could fund that final contract. But the bottom line is, even with setting aside that $2 million, there's still a surplus of over $13 million remaining from FY23. So when you combine that $13 million and almost $10 million, we're looking at a surplus on the city side at the end of fiscal year 23 of $23 million. That's not by accident, that's intentional. I've stood at this lectern many times before and told you that we have created a report where we review departmental spending in the budget every month. And if there are trends that we see that would create spending beyond the appropriation. We meet with department heads. At last week's department head meeting, I mentioned the dynamics are a little different this year than last year. It appears, and you'll see this, because the next thing I'm going to present to you is an FY24 year-to-date report, that we're spending more overtime this year, at this point in the year than we have in past years. So I'll be sitting down with department heads over the next month or so, looking at those numbers, seeing what the reasons are for them. Generally, when you see additional overtime, it's because there's vacancies and people are getting hired on overtime shifts, even in the non-public safety departments. At any rate, at the direction of the mayor, we have been vigilant about watching our spending and making sure that that we finish the year with a robust surplus, and so we have. The next slide, or the next paper in your packet, is just an expanded version of the revenue summary. I wanted you to have some of the details. So if I won't go through that in detail, but if you have any questions on those specific numbers, we can certainly do that. The next group of papers in your packet is, this is the report that we use now on a monthly basis, and consistent with the directive and the resolve. This is a year-to-date spending on the city side, and we continue to update and improve this. This is excellent work by our financial analyst, Evan Lacasse. And as you can see at the top left-hand corner of this spreadsheet, our target as of today, so this is as of today, is 33.3% spent in the entire budget. And then if you go through and look at each of the budgets, you can see what the total spending is and where we're at in each budget. If you see a red box, that means that that particular line is spent beyond the 33.3% and is something we need to keep our eye on. And as you'll note, as I said, and I'm not sure why, but we're going to find out, there's a larger use of overtime than there typically is. But in other budgets, like in the Treasurer's Debt Service, we're already at 75% of the spent for the year, because debt payments are front-loaded and they usually get paid at the end of the year. So this is a very effective tool to be able to understand what our spending trends are, where we need to cut back, where we need to watch, so that we do end up with a surplus like we did last year. The final report that I have for you is the current version of a similar spending analysis for the school department. This has been developed with a team of folks from both the school and the city finance offices. You've heard the term or the phrase open architects used over the last couple of months. Open Architects is a consulting firm with significant expertise in municipal and school finance. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, more commonly known as DESE, has hired Open Architects to assist us. And they have a person that is working with us each day. His name is TJ Plant. TJ is the former CFO in the city of Springfield. Before that, he served as the school CFO in Springfield. He has decades of municipal finance of experience, and he and I working very closely every day. In fact, I know that he's watching this meeting right now on YouTube so that he can better understand the conversations that we're having. But TJ and Open Architects have been a phenomenal resource as we try to dig in to the details of the school finances and understand not just the numbers, but the practices and the trends that led to the school deficit. So, as I've said, and I've showed this report to the school committee a couple of times, and I have mailed it to you at least once, we will continue to update this every 2 weeks. It's important to note that the information in this school report is reflective of exactly what was entered by the school employees into Munis. And so we've discovered it does not match exactly the budget that the school committee voted. You'll notice if you go through your this report in detail, it matches up with the budget that you voted in June. That's logical. That makes sense. What's in Munis doesn't quite match the school committee's budget, so we're working on updating that. But what I didn't want to do is, as we began to work to understand the school finances, we didn't want to make changes in this report because what we're trying to do is provide full, unfettered transparency, and what we see is what we provide to you, and what is available to us is available to you. So as of today, the same date, so the same percentage, we should be at 33.3% of spending in the schools. And if you look at about halfway through the final page of that report, we're at 28.87. So we're trending positively right now. We're still getting our hands on where those expenses are. We're working with Dr. Cobbs and the financial team over there to actually provide greater definition to this and to better understand how the money is allocated at the schools. We've had several meetings with their transportation people. I have daily conversations and meetings several times a week with different members of their finance team. We meet once a week as an entire group. So we're working tirelessly to understand and to quantify the status of the finances over at the schools. The one report I do not have is a detailed end-of-year report for the schools. And the reason for that is that that's something we're still working on. We are very close. We're working daily on understanding what led to the deficit, how much it is, and how we're going to address it. What I can tell you, though, tonight, with some certainty, is that when that school deficit is finally quantified within the next couple of days, that the reserves that you've just seen on the city side will be sufficient to address and extinguish that school deficit. Let me repeat that. The reserves that we've accumulated on the city side should be sufficient to address and extinguish the school deficit. Now, what that'll mean is that there will likely be an impact on our free cash once we address, so the deficit will be subtracted from that number I just gave you, that $23 million number. There will be some, and there always are, when there are grants that are applied for and not received, there's always reductions to free cash. And you can see that online when you look at the free cash calculation every year. Well, but we do not believe that those will be so great that we won't be able to handle covering the deficit. What that'll mean is it'll be a reduction in the certified free cash. Since the very beginning of this issue emerged, we've been in conversations with the Department of Revenue, with our outside auditor, and normally we would come to you and set the tax rate and then file for our free cash certification. At the request of the Department of Revenue, we are reversing that this year, and we will, we expect sometime next week to make that filing for our free cash certification. And what that will mean is our free cash will be reduced by the amount of the school deficit. That will not impact us this year in fiscal year 24. However, as you all know, we balanced this current FY24 budget with $19 million in free cash. So as we look to fiscal 25, we'll have to work to address balancing that budget. And we're already working on some ideas to address that with our finance team. Although Open Architects has been hired specifically to address the issues with the schools, this is all related, and TJ has been a great source of support and guidance on those issues. So I'll stop there so that I can answer questions, but I thought it was important that you see both the level of detail that we go into on the city side to monitor both our revenues and our expenses, the result and the benefits that that has, and the importance of it in light of the situation that we've experienced with the schools. So that's well, I wouldn't say brief, but that's a detailed overview of the status of where we're at, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilor D'Agostino.
So first, I want to thank you for all the work that goes into creating these reports and basically creating something that, if I understand you right, didn't really exist on the school side in this report here. Correct. So a lot of work went into that, and I applaud you and your team for everything that went into that. Is it possible for, I would say, the city and the school side reports, can these just be sent to us periodically, monthly, just emailed to? Absolutely. Yeah. You know, I mean, I think rather than waiting till one of us files a resolve, it would be good practice to just get this. And then, so when free cash, I don't want to say appears because it doesn't just appear, but when we certify the amount of free cash we have, in order for that to be used or allocated to something, doesn't that would that need to be an appropriation? The answer is yes, in order to use it. For instance, when we use that 19 million to balance this year's budget, that's part of that overall budget order that you vote. Okay. The calculation of the free cash is a little different because that process with Department of Revenue does not require a vote of the council. So if there are existing deficits, let's take the schools out of it just to give you an example. Right. If we had spent $1 million in Chapter 90 funds to pave roads, but we didn't file for or receive the reimbursement from the Commonwealth in time, which happens from time to time. Sure. That's something we really worked hard to clean up when I first got here. But if you didn't get the money in time, and it's actually by September 30th, they give you a little leeway, then even though the money came in after that, that would be a hit to your free cash. And so it's a snapshot of the financial condition of the city as of June 30th. However, there may be a role at some point for the city council in addressing the deficit if some of those funds are not, that would require a subsequent vote to use the free cash to extinguish the deficit. So it's still in flux. We're still working on a final solution, so stay tuned on that one. Okay. Yeah, I mean, and I don't expect you to be able to go into individual categories. That's probably more of an accounts committee topic, so we'll leave that alone. But I think that's really what I wanted, and I would appreciate it, and I hope my colleagues don't mind my request that, we just get these on a maybe monthly basis to give us an update. And again, I just thank you for all the effort that you and your team are putting in, and I think it seems like the majority of the school committee is committed to moving forward and making sure that, they're on top of this. So that's a lot of work on them too. So I do want to thank them as well. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Madam President.
Councilor Farr, was your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Clarkson, I'm not sure if this is a typo or not, but on the second page of, well, actually on the top page, that's these figures are as of June 30th, 2023, correct? Yes. Okay, so now let's go to the next page, and I think across the top where it says FY23 projected, FY23 actual, that would be FY24, wouldn't it?
On that second sheet, yes. You know what? Thank you.
We've collected 40% of what we should have for FY24 thus far from taxes.
So this spreadsheet that says FY24 city revenue, yeah, that was to give you a snapshot of what we've done so far this year, but those numbers at the top on that same row should say 24.
Yeah, that's not a problem. All right, so I do want to go to this. I really don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of the audit. I know it's going well on the city side. I know people are being interviewed. I know the solicitor's office is on top of that. But I am concerned with this document you provided showing that we have significant excess spending already, if I'm reading this right, for the schools. For example, I guess it would be the last page of the school pay code summary. And I'm trying to understand how this happens. You've got 589003 vehicles. So $350,000 was the budget. So far, we've expensed $730,920. We're at 208.83% spending for FY24 for vehicles. And I don't understand how that happens. I don't understand why when someone gets to a certain percent of spending, it should be 33% because we're 4 months into the fiscal year. Why shouldn't someone be stopping that? Someone in the accounts payable office, the superintendent, or some other person over there at the school department? Because, I mean, if you're at 208% already at the end of October, or close to the end of October, that's not a good sign. And what vehicles could we have purchased?
So when I first looked at this report, and remember, this report was something that we created in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
So it is a new phenomenon to have the ability to look at expenses in this granular detail. So I will tell you, when I first looked at this report, one of the first things I saw was that there was significant spending in transportation for vehicles. So I asked the same question. And we have purchase orders. This purchase was for buses or vans that the school department uses to transport out of district and other student transportation issues that don't require large buses. But I think the real point is far more important than what that was for. The reason we created this report is so that we, in the future, will have the ability to have the sort of stoplights that led to a $13 million surplus on the city side. So having this report is the first step, but it's the first step in having financial controls in place that prevent a deficit from happening again. And so when we put this report together and when we began instituting oversight, those expenses had already taken place. But I will tell you the how of how that happened, because the school budget itself, now if you look at the budget, as you know, the actual budget of the city of Brockton is not that big, beautiful budget book that we provide to you every year. It's the actual budget order that you pass, right? The legislative act that appropriates money in the city of Brockton is the budget order that you pass. The budget book is far more detailed than the budget order. Similarly, the schools in their budget vote had even broader. I believe they had only 4 categories. And so within those appropriations, they can legally, because these numbers, all of these rows are not the actual budget. The actual budget's much broader. So they can spend over those lines, as you can see, and there are several instances in this report. The fact that they can does not mean that they should. And again, what we're trying to do is to institute processes that allow the superintendent and his team, now with our support and oversight, to understand the spending trends And you'll start to see something you haven't seen before in a while, perhaps ever. We're going to be bringing to the school committee requests to move money around in the budget so that the spending is within the prescribed limits. And so the superintendent has pretty wide discretion to prioritize and spend as he or she sees fit. But it's our job to make sure that they have enough money to get to the end of the year. So the good news is, thus far this year, they are fairly well below the prescribed limits of where they should be in terms of spending.
But if I could just continue a couple of questions, I'm sorry.
Of course. That's why we're here.
But I want you to think about what you're saying, though. You're saying until you stepped in and did this, the inference is it wasn't being done. And I don't understand, having been on the school committee, and I know my colleague from Ward 3 was on the school committee, if the school committee approved a budget for the purchase of vehicles for $390,000 and $350,000, and they've already spent $730,000, was that done without going back to the school committee and asking for their permission? In other words, someone just decided, you know what, we're going to take that budget order and we're going to take that money that the city council, or the mayor appropriated and the city council approved, and even though we put on in our budget 350, we're going to spend 380,000 more than that. And the school committee doesn't vote on that? Because we do here, as you know. We would have to move money around or increase an appropriation for something like that.
Yes, you would, if the appropriation exceeded the amount of the statutory category that you voted. But if...
But you come to us all the time when we need to move money from personal services to overtime.
Absolutely.
Or from additional money for postage for the auditor's office.
But that's exactly my point, Counselor, that the categories in the voted budget by the school committee are so broad that you can, I'm not saying you should, but you can spend within those broad categories. And so that purchase did not require a vote of the school committee because the overall expenditure was still within the amount of appropriation. What I'm advocating for, and what we're working closely with TJ and with Dr. Cobbs, is to create a school budget that has much more detail and definition to it, so that for something like that, you would have to go to the school committee.
And I would just, and by the way, I know there's going to be an audit, but this just jumped out at me. There's not much leeway in defining vehicles. If you put aside $350,000 for vehicles, and then you suddenly decide you're going to spend twice that, $380,000 thus far, that's only 33% into the fiscal year. I can't imagine from what other category someone could say, well, you know, we can take some money out of here and put it towards vehicles. I mean, that's a very specific line item, but let me not belabor the point. Let me go to one other that intrigued me. Legal, that's on page 2, 530200. We are at 78.87% of spending for legal. I mean, I don't know what they're spending it on. I would throw up a cautionary flag that if we're 33% into the fiscal year and the school department is spending 78.87% of the money allocated for legal, they're on a target, a potential target to far exceed the money that's been set aside for that. And I'll leave that to you to maybe do some research. And the last thing, without mentioning names, I'm told, and I got a message today from an outraged person, that we still have a couple of people on paid administrative leave since the end of August. One is in the $210,000 a year category. The average Brocktonian cannot wrap their mind around $4,000 a week. And I would just say very respectfully to you, and I hope you'll carry it back to the mayor and to whomever else is necessary. If you have someone on unpaid leave for that amount of time for a valid reason, there should be movement. That person should either be terminated, in which case they have rights to go to court, maybe file for a temporary restraining order, preliminary injunction, whatever it is, but that is simply unacceptable to me, and I would say to the average Brocktonian, it's unacceptable. When you do that, that person is still accruing pension time, they're still getting paid, they still have all their benefits, and if there was justification to take them out of a position, paying that amount of money per year and to leave them on paid status, I just would like to publicly say to you, please look into it. It's unacceptable to me, and I think there should be some movement to make a decision one way or the other.
I will certainly bring that message back to the mayor.
And I do, by the way, lastly, I do appreciate this level of detail. This is the way you protect money, taxpayers' money, and protect the interests of the school system to make sure we're spending it where it's needed. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Just to, Madam Chair, just to answer the councilor's previous question, and it's a good example, I think, Councilor, of how this report is set up. If you go back and look at that legal line, the initial appropriation for this year was $355,000. They've expended about $34,000 so far this year. But then you see in that next to last column, there's a number of 245, 546.
Yep.
That's money that's been encumbered, so not spent but encumbered. So I will look into more detail, I'm not sure, but my guess is that the school department has relationships with, certainly with Murphy Hesse, but with other law firms as well. And so they've encumbered that money because they anticipate spending that much. And so it's an important distinction because that entire column that you see there is money, that's $3 million that has been encumbered but not spent. And I bring that to your attention because that's one of the practices that TJ and I have been working on with the schools. It's not necessary to encumber that money all the time. Part of the reason for a budget is you pay as you go, right? And so as you need the money, it's there to spend. If you encumber tons of money, it can skew a review or a report at where your spending is for the year. But also it's important that at the end of the year, unless you need it for a specific purpose, that those encumbered monies should be closed out and will flow to the bottom line. And so that's a practice that we're working on to try to bring that same approach that we use on the city side to the schools. So excellent questions. Thank you, Councilor.
All right, Madam Chair, if I could, just one more, and I believe this is going to be special ed, but 533100, pupil contract services. And again, there is expended, but then there's encumbered. And now, in my day, encumbered means we have an actual purchase order that identifies a vendor and an amount of money that's going to have to be paid for a particular good or service. Not just that you're setting aside that money for future use and you just want it there in case you need it. But it looks like we are we're halfway through expending that appropriation or that money that's been allocated, and that's significantly more than 33%. And if that's special ed, we have to do it. I mean, the kids deserve it, and we don't have a choice. So I know you're on top of it, and forgive me for being a little bit skittish about this, but
Not at all.
when I see those percentages that are much higher than they should be for where we are in the fiscal year, obviously it raises concerns.
The best disinfectant is sunlight, right? So it's good that we're having these discussions. I'm having these same discussions with the school committee, and it's good that we're having them there as well, because that's, I think, we collectively have a duty to be transparent and responsive and credible. And so we're putting a lot of effort into sharing information so that we can attain those goals.
Thank you again. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Mr. Clarkson. And like everybody else, I'm appreciative of the breakdown that you offered to us tonight. It's easily digestible, so I do appreciate that. I just have a few questions regarding the free cash discussion. Now, you said that the DOR is going to allow us to front load the certification of free cash. I just wanted to clarify, did you say that the council would be required to vote or not on dedicating that free cash to the budget deficit that we'll later find out about? Will that be a vote of this council?
No. No, it typically isn't, right? When we file for the free cash certification, not just here in Brockton, but in any community in the Commonwealth, that is not something that requires a legislative vote.
No, to use the free cash to plug that hole. Is that a vote of this council?
No, I don't believe so,
Okay.
because the hole exists, right? In Massachusetts, a municipality cannot legally end a year in a deficit. And so if there are deficits, we're required to address those with whatever surpluses we have. If we did not have these surpluses, we'd be having a very different discussion. We'd be having the discussion that Springfield had when they had a multi-million-dollar deficit and didn't have the funds to address it. What happens then is the state comes in and provides financing to cover the debt, but they don't provide that financing without strings, and then they come in and take over. And so we're, I believe, fortunate that we had the ability, through our fiscally conservative approach, to have sufficient funds on hand to extinguish the deficit.
Okay, understood. And you said that we would know that number, or at least your office would know what that deficit number is in the next few days?
Yes, we're very, very close. I just, because all of us don't have significant experience with the accounting approach at the schools, we're being very cautious and extremely detailed in making sure we understand where all of the potential deficits are and all of the different funds and revolving funds. And so our team has worked long days. I should give real kudos, not just on the school side, but here, our acting auditor, Irene Giannopoulos, our budget director, Tiff Casulo, my financial analysts, the accountants over at the school department. We've really come together as a team, and these folks are working long days. Irene was here till, I think, 8 o'clock last Friday night, closing the books with Pam Wood, our Munis consultant, and a woman by the name of Barbara Costa, who was a town accountant in many communities we brought on to assist with the close because she's done it so many times. So it's been really a Herculean but a team effort to get this done, and our folks, our team really deserves a lot of credit.
Well, we appreciate that, everybody who you mentioned. Thank you from the City Council for your efforts. Is there a plan to then present that information to the council or to the city at large, or what do you then do when you have this information?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, our goal is to be transparent. I provide reports to the school committee now. I'm at every school committee meeting. And once we have that free cash certification, that filing is filed with the Department of Revenue. It's, of course, a public document. So I pledge you, when we get that done, I won't just refer you to the page. I will send you a narrative that explains the filing, what the numbers are, and what it means for Brockton.
The deficit, so is that a separate, the deficit and the free cash? I think you were saying you combine those.
They're directly related.
Okay.
Yeah. One will be a function of the other.
Okay, understood. I appreciate that. Now, what about, and I'm just trying to remember, and for some reason I feel like the city has some sort of reserve funding itself, right? Do we have a rainy day fund or something to that effect?
We do. And in the coming months, we'll have more discussions about that. We have a number of stabilization funds that we call them. We're not proposing to or having to use any of those funds to address this deficit. In those cases, that would require a vote of the City Council to transfer money out of those funds. In fact, transferring out of stabilization, I believe, is a 9/10 vote, I believe, Mr. Clerk?
3/4, I believe, but I'd have to look that up.
But those funds may come in handy when we look to balance the 25 budget. So we have a regular stabilization fund that has a fairly modest amount in it, a couple of $1 million. We have the Chapter 324 stabilization fund, which was created more than 30 years ago, the last time Brockton faced a financial challenge like this. That fund has about $7 million in it. We also have, and you created, the Pension Stabilization Fund, which we created when we did the pension obligation bond, that has about $25 million in it. The use of that is limited based on the parameters of how you set it up.
Right.
But certainly, as we look down the road 8 months when we're crafting the FY25 budget, we may look to some of those reserves to help us balance that budget, depending on what the ultimate free cash number is.
Right. All right. I appreciate that. Okay. Now, you mentioned that the intent was on the school side to kind of create more statutory categories, right? So that they can't just have that one, one of the 4 overall categories where they could do this vehicle spending within that one category. So the intent is to create additional categories, which would kind of build a wall between some of those mass spendings within one single category. The fact that they're statutory, is that derived from this council or is that derived from the state, the categories?
That's just the nomenclature,
okay.
And it's based on, I believe, the statutory authority of the board that creates it. But I think that having a more detailed budget is a good idea, and we will be discussing it with the school committee. But let me make it clear that the sole authority on how that budget is constructed is the school committee. And so I believe we've been working well together. I know that some members have expressed concern about the tightness with which we've been looking to monitor the funds. But I think TJ and I are very aligned in this, that we hope perhaps to bring a refined budget to the school committee in January, halfway through the year, so that they have a better idea of how the money's been allocated.
Okay, and then just lastly, when we're doing our budget, we have every department head come before us to, do a presentation on their budget, their needs, and why to fund the budget as they present it. My understanding on the school side, it was just the CFO who would kind of present the overall budget. Is there any contemplation of, on the school side, having department heads come before them to do a similar type of budgetary process that we do here at the council?
I think that's a great idea, but, we'll, again, be working with the superintendent and the school committee to try to refine the budget process. That's up to them, but I think any additional level of detail and public discussion we have about resource allocation is a good thing.
Right. I agree. And again, thank you, Mr. Clarkson, and that's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Would anyone else like to speak? I have something, but you go next, Councilor
Thank you.
Azar.
Good evening, Mr. Clarkson. Just a quick question. I might have missed something somewhere, but did you say we have an acting auditor? Where is our auditor?
So our auditor, Karen Proval, has been out for a while on medical leave.
Okay, so we have an acting?
So Irene Giannopoulos, who's the assistant auditor, has been acting in her place.
Oh, she has been?
Since Karen's been out.
So she's been appointed as an acting auditor?
Believe
Interim.
she has an appointment from the mayor, yes. Interim acting, yeah.
Oh, I just don't remember coming before us. Okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I think it was done in a communication that came before. I don't believe, and I'm a bureaucrat, not an attorney, but I don't believe an interim appointment requires the assent of the council, just a permanent appointment, but I do believe it was noticed to you.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Thank
We
you.
received correspondence. Someone else? Okay. Then I have a question. Mr. Clarkson, first of all, thank you for all of the efforts of your department and for your efforts, because it sounds like you're bringing order and clarity and sunlight, as you said, to this interesting situation that the city is in. So this is my question. You spoke earlier about the city budget book and how it goes into such detail on when we meet in June, but actually it's the actual order that we pass that is the budget, okay?
Right.
And in a similar way, your office and the mayor's office collects all of the wish lists, the proposals of the various departments, including the school department, what they'd like, and they pass their desired budget order, but then you review it against what you think the receipts will be and how much money we can afford. And so the order that we receive from you and from the mayor is actually sometimes and often different based on what you think we can afford to spend, right?
Yes.
And so the budget that we passed in June, the order that had to do with the schools, that did not actually match what the schools requested. Isn't that right?
Well, it did in one sense and did not in the other. So for the net school spending, which is the larger amount, some $219 million, I believe, matched to the dollar what the schools requested of us and what we recommended to the city council. They were exactly in alignment. And I believe every year, at least in Mayor Sullivan's tenure, the schools have always been granted exactly what they asked for in terms of net school spending. What the difference for the non-net school spending was that the schools asked for roughly $15 million. We recommended to the city council that you appropriate about $11 million. But it's important to note that that discussion actually occurred in this room with me standing here and you sitting there and the school committee members seated behind us. So that discussion was held in the light of day, and you, this council, elected to appropriate the amount we recommended. And knowing what I know now about transportation, I believe it was an appropriate amount. So that amount should, that $11 million should probably be sufficient to fund the transportation for the year. But you draw a really important distinction, Madam Chair, because although the school committee has broad authority to spend within the money that has been appropriated to them, the appropriating authority overall is, in fact, the city council. And your appropriations are done in public meetings, televised, and then published. In fact, our budget, I'll take a minute to raise the flag here a little bit. Our budget is one of the most transparent in the Commonwealth, and in fact has received an award, an international award, for the last 3 years for the level of transparency of the city's budget. So that includes your appropriation to fund the school department.
Okay, and language is very important to me. And so when we receive those budget orders, they aren't suggestions or recommendations. They are something much more than that. We're not allowed by law to add, to increase a number that's on an order. We can only decrease it or pass it as is.
That is absolutely correct.
So we couldn't have, it was more than a recommendation, it was the budget order that was submitted to us. And this is important to me, of course, I'm sure you're aware. The City Council has been accused of not telling the truth to the school committee, of taking their budget and not passing it as it was, when in fact, we passed what was in front of us.
You most certainly did, Madam Chair, but in fact, as they say in football, look at the tape. We could all go back and look at the discussion that was had in this room the night of that discussion with the superintendent and his staff and some members of the school committee here, where I explained just what you just described, and that they had asked for more, but we thought this was what we could afford for now, and if they needed more during the year, we would transfer money. But the process was as prescribed by the law and was very transparent.
Okay. I did look at the tape, thank you. But I want to make that point just in light of, I don't think we did anything wrong. In fact, I think we acted appropriately and prudently as we're tasked to do by the law.
Most certainly.
And I just want to clarify that with you. It looks like we're on the same page on that.
Indeed, yes.
Thank you very much.
Motion to recommend favorably?
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend this favorably. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. It carries. Mr. Clarkson, thank you.
Thank you all.
Item 11, resolve, whereas for fiscal year 2024, beginning on July 1st, 2023, there are vacant but funded positions within city government, including the school department, and whereas it is prudent to identify those positions which will not be filled for several months because of recruitment, background checks, required training programs, and other related factors, and whereas the deficit caused by overspending of school appropriations for fiscal year 2023 creates a need to identify financial resources to address outstanding obligations, be it resolved, the Chief Financial Officer attend a meeting of the City Council to discuss the potential transfer of funds currently allocated to vacant positions, such funds to be transferred to a school deficit reserve fund or fund by similar title. Example, Police Department multiple entry-level vacant positions which are fully funded from July 1st, 2023, but which will likely not be filled until after January 1st, 2024 because of background checks, physical and mental testing, criminal record checks, and available police training academy classes. Such unused funds provide at least 6 months of potential revenue to be assigned to the school department deficit. Invited, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, Mr. Clarkson.
Good evening again. So this is really an extension of the discussion we had. I will say, to just get our discussion rolling, that the basis, a large portion of those surpluses that formed that $13 million surplus in our operating budget were positions like this. In a city so large, we have 200 plus sworn police officers and 200 plus firefighters. We're always playing catch up. Retirements, injuries, people who leave. Particularly, we're fortunate on the fire side, but we run our own academy, so it's a little easier to replenish. But with police officers, it's gotten even more and more difficult. The rules have changed about how you book people for academies and the number of academies. So we're always playing catch up. And there's always vacant positions. And so we budget for a full complement of employees. But in most years, the leftover funds for positions that remain vacant form the basis of our free cash. So it's an important dynamic. You know, there's good and bad to it. If we were at a full complement in every department, we'd be more efficient and nimble, but we'd have a lot less free cash. So there's an inverse relationship there. So we try to strike a balance every year, and I think essentially what we're, as I explained on the previous resolve, the impact of having those reserves will be similar to what's being proposed under this resolve, although I don't think the creation of the reserve fund is required, because having the cash available at the end of the year is itself makes the funds available to in this case, to address this deficit. I hope it will never happen again and we won't have to plan for future times, but that's the practical impact of having that money available with those vacancies. So with that, because I discussed it in detail in the previous resolve, I'm happy to continue the dialogue.
Thank you. Councilor Farwell, you sponsored this?
Yes.
Okay, you can go first.
Yeah. You've just identified exactly what I hope we will do, and that is I hope we don't have to dip as much into reserves as you mentioned. I hope we don't have to spend too much free cash. We have, for example, 33 vacant positions in the police department. They've been vacant since July 1st. They probably will not be filled for months. So I was just looking to go through all of the major departments with large numbers of personnel, identify those vacant positions, and carve that money out so that it helps offset whatever deficit we uncover in the school department. My concern was that if you leave the money there, there is a temptation, well, let's use it for something else, or let's transfer it to another category of spending. And until we really get that school deficit squared away, I'm going to be a little bit concerned about where we allocate funds, that's all.
Yeah,
and that's a report that you could send to us. It doesn't, nothing to do tonight, Mr. Claxon.
No, but I love the innovation. I mean, that's the dynamic we should have here when we're working together to try to come up with creative solutions to the problems we face. So we have that information readily available. So we'll get you that report and take a look at what that means in terms of dollars for FY24.
And lastly, I don't care if it's in a separate fund, colleagues, as long as we identify the number that's available and we have it available to apply to the school deficit. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Councilor D'Agostino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's okay if the answer to this is not yet. I understand that.
Can I just say not yet then? No.
You're still working on figuring out exactly what happened with FY23, and so that's why I say it's very possible your answer is not yet. But you made a comment about basically making sure that nothing like this happens again, and so I guess I feel like it would be remiss not to ask what things are being put in place to ensure, not hope, but ensure that this never happens again with the school department or any other department, because let's be honest, it could be another department. I would hope not. I'd hope you would, anyway.
The answer is not yet. I do have some answers for you.
Oh, wonderful.
What we could do, one of the first steps is what I've already showed you, right? It's closely tracking the school expenses on a regular basis to make sure that both the micro and the macro spending are within prescribed limits. One of the other things we've already instituted is position control. So the mayor and I both from this lectern have talked to you before about the controls that we've put in place on the city side. And even if it's a budgeted position, nobody gets hired in the city without the mayor and I signing off, the mayor saying he wants to fill the position, and I saying that there's sufficient funds to pay it. We now have a similar process in place at the schools. And so before any position is filled, my team does an analysis of the money available for the rest of this year, the cost of these positions, and I sign it only if they tell me that there are sufficient funds. Dr. Cobbs also has to sign off, and that's every position. So I will tell you, it's created a tremendous amount of work, but it's the steps we have to take to preserve the integrity of the process and ensure that we're not here a year from now talking about how we're going to cover the FY24 deficit. Those aren't the only two things we can do. There's lots more. We're working with the grants folks at the schools to have a better sense of grant money coming in and out, of the revolving funds. And so there's a whole host of financial controls that we will be putting in place. But we're starting with these two most obvious, and that is tracking how we spend and making sure that when we hire people, there's money behind it.
And in light of that, you talked about with the position control, the superintendent, as well as you, have to sign off. And they don't have a CFO right now. Will that long-term be something that comes over here to your office or the finance office for approval versus reverting back at some point?
That is a great question, and I think that's one where we can and should have much more detailed discussions on, because what the relationship between the city and the schools looks like long-term, I think is a very good subject for discussion. So the reason why I'm able to act in the capacity that I'm acting is that Chapter 324 of the Acts of 1990, which created my position, gave me the ability to exercise some oversight over the school finances. It's not traditionally how that has been, but the statute itself, based on the advice of the city solicitor, empowers me to do that. So it's a legitimate discussion long-term how that should look and whether or not there are ways the schools in the city can work more closely together in more permanent ways. TJ and I are working on a short-term flow chart of how because it's confusing for folks over there because there are some folks that are out on leave. And so, people need to know to whom they report. So we're working on a short-term flow chart, and then as they bring in an interim school business manager, that interim flow chart may look a little different, and in the long term, it'll be even more different. But we're trying to bring some order now so that everyone understands what their responsibilities are, to whom they report, and to whom they are accountable. So I know that was a long answer, but it's a subject that we collectively have given a lot of thought to, and we're really trying to look at what's the best process long-term for overseeing the school finances.
Right, okay. Yeah, no, and I'm sure it's an ongoing, longer discussion, but I think, for me anyway, it's important that some sort of controls remain in place here on the city side in this building, long-term, permanently, I would say, because as we've unfortunately learned, the other option is something like this could happen again. It just seems like the only way we can make sure that this doesn't happen again is if your office is able to maintain a level of oversight like we just talked about with position control. That's, because ultimately they're a department within the city. They're not their own city. So if something happens over there, it's our problem, and I guess that's why I'm asking about long-term controls. So, so I appreciate your answer, and I'm sure there's more to come on that in future discussions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be brief. Again, good evening, Mr. Clarkson. So when it comes to kind of the theory of this resolve, I understand it. If there's a vacant position and hasn't been filled, and we're about three months into the fiscal year, that we would capture those monies for those vacant positions, put them aside, and hopefully be able to use that money to address our school deficit. I think the logic is pretty clear there. You brought up the issue of position control. So my concern is that, number one, that this is not kind of a strategy in and of itself to fill that gap, that we would hold off on hiring so that we could accumulate those monies to pay off that debt, because obviously if there's a vacant position and it's budgeted, there's a need for that position. So, I mean, I understand if it's not filled retrospectively, hold on to it, but that it's not a theory in and of itself to prospectively to not fill vacant positions when we can fill them in the hopes to just save more money for this deficit. And then secondly, on the school side, kind of the same thing where our kids, they need all the help they can get over at Brockton High. And it's also my understanding that, we have statutory obligations in the programs that we are that we initiate over at the school to have a certain amount of staffing and funding for those, or that we could be at risk of losing federal monies because we're not meeting our obligation here on the city side. And so I just wonder if you could speak to that we do have that in mind, that we're meeting our obligations over on the school side, and we're not holding back on hiring with the sole purpose of filling in this deficit.
Yeah, I can assure you, both on the city and the school side, that that absolutely is not the case. The decision whether or not to hire, why to hire, rests solely with the superintendent. So the role that we play is for a position that they've identified. We answer a simple yes or no question. Are there sufficient funds to pay that person to the end of the year? And if it's no, we actually will try to find money elsewhere in the budget if it's identified as a priority. On the city side, of course, that is absolutely not the case. I think if department heads have a position they feel is important to either create newly or to fill that's vacant, there may be, but I can't recall off the top of my head a time when the mayor has not agreed to move forward. Because generally, our staffing levels are very reasonable, if not low, to begin with. We're not overly robustly staffed. So I wouldn't advocate not filling positions to try to save money, because I think we're either appropriately or understaffed as it is.
All right, and I agree, and I just wanted to clarify that issue, so I appreciate the commentary. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, I have something. I think the purpose of this resolve is to throw out an idea, you know, along the lines of what can we do, where can we look to find additional money to satisfy this deficiency. I think it's fair to say that everyone on the council is very concerned and upset about this. We take these rules very seriously. Watching the pocketbook is our job according to the charter, our primary job. And I've noticed in the 6 budgets that I've worked on and approved that there are positions that get carried forward every year without getting filled. And so it probably is something for you to look into. I certainly think we should be tightening our belts every way that we can. And something that was brought to my attention by someone is that the superintendent had $1 million fund or separate that he could spend at his discretion every year, and it actually appeared in the budget book. I went back and found it, and I've probably seen it before as well. I hope you've yanked those funds and we're hanging on to that. That's just an awful lot of money, and I'm just very concerned about some of the spending that I've heard rumor about, and I don't mean to throw rumors into the mix tonight, but I know that that money was appropriated, and so I'd just like you to speak on it and maybe tell us how we're addressing things like that.
So I think on the city side, I think it's entirely appropriate to have discussions about positions that have been vacant for a long time and what we do with them. That's a very legitimate discussion. We don't have to wait till budget time to have that. We can have a resolve and we can do some analysis and come in and have a discussion so that when budget time comes, you're equipped to be able to make those decisions. On the school side, the very reason why we created this report is so we could show not only the school committee, but the city council and the public where those resources were being allocated. And as I mentioned, one of the things we'd like to do is to work with the school committee to maybe halfway through the year reallocate the budget so that the money is being allocated where the school committee deems their priority areas are. And so because those funding categories are so broad, it provides a wide amount of discretion. And I think constricting that discretion a little bit so that there's policy direction from the school committee is appropriate.
And can those 4 areas be changed?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And who changes those, the school committee?
The school committee. you know, you could, if you wanted to, you could vote a much more detailed budget. Your budget that you vote could reflect the budget book that you look at. I would never recommend you do that because the government would come to a grinding halt, and I'm not kidding you. You know, your council meetings would be 4 hours long because you'd be doing a whole host of transfers within what we call statutory categories every meeting. And so I think the level of detail that you have is sufficient. It keeps us on our toes, and I think the results prove that out, right? That we were able to develop a surplus because we keep the spending in check. We're trying to bring that same commitment to discipline and transparency to the schools.
Fortunately, not everyone was on their toes when it came to the budget, and it is very unfortunate. Thank you, Mr. Clarkson.
Thank you all very much.
I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Thank you. And motions are made and properly seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you.
After he reads
Passes.
it.
Item number 12, resolved to have Nathalie Jean, the Executive Director of the Brockton Redevelopment Authority, appear before the Finance Committee of the Brockton City Council to introduce herself and update the City Council on the BRA and the Executive Director's plans moving forward. Invited, Nathalie Jean, Executive Director of the BRA.
Madam Chair, thank you. Ms. Jean contacted Councilor Texera and myself via email stating that she had a previous commitment for this evening. So I would like to make a motion to postpone this to the November 20th Finance meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly seconded to postpone this matter. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. It carries. Well, councilors, we will not be meeting. That's the end of our agenda.
Madam Chair, we still have item number 2.
Oh, forgive me.
Motion to postpone item number 2.
Second.
Motion's been made and properly
I
seconded.
think it was item number 6, correct?
My apologies, item number 6.
Item 6.
Number 6, reappointment of David Andrews. Okay, motion's been made and properly seconded to postpone it to the
November 20th meeting.
next Finance Committee meeting. And all in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you, it carries. Okay, that's the end of our agenda. I just want to remind everyone that we're not meeting on Monday, November 6th, which is a week from tonight. Our next meeting will be as City Council on Monday, November 13th, 2023. Tuesday, October 7th, is Election Day.
November.
Oh, excuse me, November 7th. My goodness, I'm tired. I want to implore all of our voters to vote. We're having early voting all this week, and then, of course, there'll be Tuesday, November 7th. Please vote. It's imperative that everyone vote. Thank you. Unless someone else would like to speak? Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you.
All right.